So here I'm looking at pretension in film, that odious quality that some films have of trying to make out that they're more important or cleverer or deeper than they really are, or worse, that odious quality some films have of sincerely believing that they're cleverer or more important or deeper than they really are. Of course, films don't think, but it's easier to identify the films as pretentious than the makers. That's clouded by intentionality, or lack of. What is pretension in film? In my view, it's one of the worst things a movie can do. In that it's sort of self-sabotaging, in that it almost always makes the audience feel condescended to, which I think is rarely deliberate and even more rarely effective. It's the other side, the lesser known side, of the condescension coin. For an example of that other side, and brace yourselves for some very pointy cringe, Jupiter Ascending.
You've never been stung by a bee, have you?
No.
No, bees are genetically designed to recognize royalty.
Royalty?
Bees aren't like humans. They don't question or doubt. Bees don't lie. So, you've been taught that the birthplace of the human race is Earth. It's not.
Here the filmmakers, the Wachowskis, I wouldn't recommend it. Don't show, they tell. They don't let the audience pick up on things, they have to whack them over the head with it. Clunk.
Easier to show you.
You've probably seen countless movies where something important happens in the first act, or something important is focused on, only for that to come back in the final act. It could be a character development, it could be an object that's important to the story, and then instead of the movie allowing us to remember what happened an hour ago, it provides us with a flashback, as if the producers themselves are saying, well, you weren't concentrating, were you? I mean, if you're not a moron, I don't know what is. Spoon-feeding is part of the mainstream cinema diet, and although it's not what I'm talking about here, I think like pretension, it's never really as effective as it is alienating.
They said I could never have a normal life, that I could never have a family. They said it cannot work with the responsibilities of the Avatar.
Why can't the Avatar have a family?
I
Ask that.
If spoon-feeding and exposition dumps condescend to the audience by assuming that they can't keep up, pretension does the same thing whilst being more inward-looking. It's not so much that you're too stupid for a pretentious movie, as the pretentious movie is too smart for you. But it isn't that it's too smart, it's that it wants to be too smart. I'm not saying deep or very serious movies, or movies that sincerely attempt to be meaningful, are automatically pretentious. But they can be. For me, pretension seems to occur more often, or I detect it more often, when I think the movie I'm watching isn't entirely sincere. When I think it secretly wants to be important, or seen as intelligent, and those things seem to be more important to the filmmakers than the story, or the meaning, or the art. When ego drives the creative process, rather than art. I would describe the Human Centipede trilogy, yes, it's a trilogy, remember, as pretentious not because it's pretending to be clever, but that it's pretending to be anything other than an excuse to gross out and cash in. At least with the old nasties, the makers would just say, here's the torture porn, enjoy the torture porn. Now it's all got social meaning and meta stripes, pretension as deflection of criticism. But it's not always the case that pretension is there to give airs or create a veil or deceive. Some pretension can come from a sincere place. I cannot tell you of the sincerity of Jean Cocteau in his direction of Le Testament d'Orphée. I don't know if he was trying to look clever, or if this was all natural, or how intentional the self-indulgence is, but I can tell you that despite some genuinely very interesting moments, It really smacks of pretension.
Je changerais de fantôme, et qu'ici, une fleur saurait les mettre en fuite.
I bring up this example because I think Cocteau was a true artist. I think he contributed greatly to cinema, and although I find this particular film very pretentious, it also has a lot of really good ideas in it, and I think more artistic merit in its little finger than what I'm about to show you in a couple of minutes. So what makes it pretentious? Well, it's extremely meta and self-analytical to the point where it doesn't feel like a narrative film. It stars the director sort of as himself, but also as an 18th century poet. Pablo Picasso pops in, because look at the famous artist I know. And there's stuff like this.
Puis-je vous demander comment vous vous y êtes pris pour voyager dans le temps?
Les poètes savent pas mal de choses. Redoutables.
What I'm getting at is that it feels pretentious because the movie seems to be seeking to be clever, not to advance the story or advance a character or inform us, but to let us know that it's clever. But whereas Cocteau, I feel, was pretty self-aware in what he was doing in self-indulgent terms, and possibly didn't care, sort of cancelling the seeking out, if that's the case, something like Lady in the Water might exemplify pretty well what it's like to come off pretentiously, without meaning to or realising it. Again, this brings up issues of intentionality. What is intentional consciously? Does it even matter?
I'll put on the DVD.
And this is where, dear friend, we meet the spoiler warning. Yes, Han is Luke's dad, and the link between gum disease and Soylent Green has been known to the authorities for years, and still, they do nothing. Serenity is a film from 2019 that I am now going to spoil for you. Serenity stars Matthew Lincoln McConaughey, Anne Hathaway, Diane Lane, other people, in a film about a man who somehow had a childhood romance with a woman half his age, who asks him to murder her abusive husband in exchange for $10 million.
He hears you through his computer screen. If I didn't catch fish all day...
I didn't catch fish all
If
day.
I didn't
catch fish all day, I'd find a way to kill you.
I think the clips I showed you give an idea as to why it's pretentious. As ever, it's the handling. But wait, there's more. In what has to be both one of the most foreseeable and oddly placed twists or reveals, it turns out it's all just a video game. Baker Dill, our main character, yes, that's right, Dill Baker, people have different names, you know. Bill Baker isn't a real person at all, but a video game character based on the creator's father who died in Iraq. The creator being a young boy whose stepfather, etc., etc. This is explained to us in no uncertain terms halfway through, literally halfway through, despite Pickled William apparently having no clue for some time after. The way it's done isn't just heavy-handed, it's self-aggrandizing.
Did you get it? Someone made the whole thing up. All of this.
There's nothing inherently wrong with the story necessarily, it's the way it's told and the weight its ideas, which aren't especially dazzling, are given. Imagine if the movies Bill and Ted tried to sell the idea of the time machine as breathtaking, not only because time travel is a completely new idea that no one's ever had before, but also because having it as a phone booth is the most succinct metaphor for modern life since William C. Durant allowed photographs to be taken of himself throwing a wiener down a toilet. It feels like being sat next to somebody at a bar, scrolling through Marmaduke cartoons on their phone, rhetorically saying, "Do you get it?" only to tell you anyway. For hours. 2001: A Space Odyssey has philosophical ideas and analogies, and even thought experiments, if that's what you need to call ideas too. But it does not hit you over the head with its ideas.
Without your space helmet, Dave, we're going to find that rather difficult.
It never tries to steer you away from the wrong conclusion. It never sets out that there is a right or wrong conclusion. It doesn't sink its own meaning and its own weight by spelling things out. It does not lack subtlety. The understanding of the viewer isn't an aching worry for the director. Kubrick doesn't sacrifice the story, the tone, or the beat for everyone understanding. My God, I should just go on IMDb right now and let everyone know that they just don't get it. If we contrast Serenity with something I'm sure many people do think is pretentious, Synecdoche.
Regardless of how this particular thing works itself out, I will be dying.
Synecdoche has been described as a postmodern film, but depending on whatever your definition of postmodern is, I'd probably say it's less avant-garde than that. It's surreal and weird, but there is a story. It's just a story about the remainder of one man's life, or how that plays out in the constructs of his own mind, or something. That may sound pretentious, and I think there are good arguments for it being just that. But I don't think Synecdoche is pretentious, because I don't think it's trying to impress. I think that it's thoughtful, not because it's attempting to seem clever, but because it's trying to explore and convey something.
An exciting, mysterious future is now behind you. Lived, understood, disappointing.
But I think another important part of the difference here is, as mentioned, artistic intentionality. Like in the Last Testament of Orpheus, there is more going on than just rhetorical, "Oh whoa, what is death?" questions. There are motifs, meanings behind framing decisions beyond just what looks good, editing choices that inform meaning, a carefully crafted story. There is refinement, and I think it helps, if you're going to do something lofty, to have on hand a little bit of wit, even if it isn't yours. Pretension is of course subjective. Anyone could find anything pretentious, and will never really know, as perhaps the filmmakers will never really know, all that was going on in the filmmakers' brains. Ooh, pretentious. So perhaps a better way to look at it is practically. A film set in 1980s Kiev about existential denial is never going to attract a mainstream, enormous audience. But if it is utterly humorless about it, and if it's as much about how the director is oh so clever as it is about how Ivan can't get out of bed, it restricts things further for itself. And artistically, the harder you try to look deep, the more superficial you are. When I was a younger man, and I would read such things, I came across some notes from Nietzsche, published after his death. Your thoughts are not your experiences. They are an echo and after effect of your experiences. As when your room trembles when a carriage goes past. I, however, am sitting in the carriage, and often I am the carriage itself. That's not an endearing thing to say. If you're going to say it, you better be Friedrich Nietzsche, and not just an dude. And even then, in conclusion, saying, "Look how blank I am, how clever I am," never works out for the art, or the media, or the person saying it. And now, to starch out the irony, I will read from one of my poems. "Lo," said the baker, parsimoniously, his breath falling into the sea mist like a bean, falling from a boat into the ocean which is beneath it, and sanguine in its misery. It's a fish. But a fish can be more than a fish, especially when the fish is a tuna named Murder. Next time I'll be talking about the value of fame in the industry and how it's declining. See you then.
We are caught in war wanting peace. We're torn by division wanting unity.
Möge Ihnen die uns so oft Beweise Ihrer unerschütterlichen...
Now for something